The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Theo Eschart from Henry Stewart Events, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, How to Automate Marketing Operations for Streamlined Digital Asset Management, kindly sponsored by CyanGate. During the session, please send through your questions at any point using the questions box on your GoToWebinar side panel. Also, a reminder that a recording of this session will be sent to you tomorrow, so you can view it again at your own pace. Now it's my great pleasure to pass you over to Erica Goldwater, who will be moderating this session.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us from a snowy East Coast. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. Today we are going to have Bulent Dogan, who's the founder and senior solution architect from CyanGate, Kim Johnson, communications leader and digital asset management at Kohler, which everyone is familiar with Kohler, and David Sultan, who is the head of product and innovation at OneTag. And before we get started with the presentation, we have a very quick poll just to set the stage a little bit and understand what the challenges are that everyone is facing today in terms of digital asset management. So Theo, if you could put the poll up, that'd be great. Okay, everyone can see this. What are your biggest challenges when managing digital assets? You can select one or many, and we'll share the results in just a second. I have guesses what I think it's going to be, but let's see. Slowing down just a little bit. Let's give it just a few more seconds, Theo. Okay, let's call it. Wow, okay. I sort of anticipated that, but that's a big disparity, a big jump. So the number one challenge was integration with other solutions, with 70% of the attendees selecting that. And then the rest are really pretty evenly split between scalability and the number of assets, evolving platforms and syndication challenges, and content complexity. So probably no surprise to all of you on the call. So without further ado, now that we've sort of set the stage, what some of our biggest challenges are, I'll hand it over to Bulent, and he's going to talk about some of the best practices and common pain points for marketing operations.
All right, welcome everyone. So I'll jump in directly with the common pain points so we can easily talk about what are the issues that we are facing today when it comes to digital asset management. So there are many systems out there, and the first thing people complain about is I can't find the asset. And these are not because our digital asset management systems are hard to use or they don't provide the functions that we need or users need. It is because most of the time we are missing the metadata. I've seen so many examples of switching systems just because they think or the business thinks that users are not happy with the user interface, or they are not happy because nothing shows up when they search. But at the end, it won't show up if you don't have the metadata. And it's really key to make sure that you can put all this metadata to define your assets in the system, but it takes a lot of time to put that all in. It takes a tremendous amount of effort. You need to have potentially even dedicated people to do that. We're trying to speed that process up with AI, but it's still not there. So there is still a lot of work that needs to be done on completing the metadata on all of our assets within the DAM systems. The second challenge is usually rights management, rights clearance. So when you use your content on your websites or you use them on your various properties, social media, you want to make sure that that piece of content can be used within that medium, whether it's social, website, and you're using it within the right time frames, and you have the right to distribute that. And rights can become very complicated. It can include the talent on the content. It can include even the venue, the music. There are lots of components to that, and making sure that those are all captured correctly in your DAM systems is pretty daunting task. Nowadays, content is also getting complex. Content used to be just a JPEG image. Everybody was happy with that. Now we have all kinds of content. We are pushing content out to VR, AR. We're pushing content out to different social channels, video platforms, broadcast. Also, print is still there. So all of that content has different formats, different transformations you have to apply to them when you're distributing them. You have to optimize them. You have to optimize for different devices. You have different sizes of devices now that you have to think about, different resolutions for different devices. It's getting pretty complicated. And next, I would talk about time to market. It is when you are trying to get your products, your campaigns out the door, you face issues because content is not ready. They haven't been delivered to you. You couldn't get them in the optimized size and for different devices. They're not color corrected yet. You have to collaborate with many people within the DAM system or even outside of the DAM system with different specialized tools to get your content ready to be pushed out to different distribution channels. And distribution channels are complicated now. Now, if you think about Amazon, the images you see on Amazon are probably very different than the images you see on your own website, because Amazon has a different standard for making sure that you come up as the first page results. They have to put people who have better products on the first page, and to be able to do that, they look at media. Media sells the product, and the media content that you're putting out there needs to be complete, needs to include various different types of aspects of the product, and should include a variety of content, in context shots, beauty shots, different size measuring shots where you can have people holding a Coke bottle to see what is the size of that Coke bottle, so that you prevent people making mistakes when they are purchasing. So these complicated distribution across different channels requirements are making everybody's life harder, and also increasing the amount of content we have to generate for different channels. Getting your products out the door, getting your campaigns out the door becomes challenging. So if we talk about an example of that, which is one of the biggest examples nowadays, is the e-commerce optimization. So when you're trying to get your content out to e-commerce sites, you have to first of all look at the source of truth. Typically, your source of truth for your digital assets in the digital asset management system. It's not your product information management system. It's not your ERP system. You have to start from the DAM system. And I'm a little technical, so I always talk about some technical concepts within the business reality. I call this separation of concerns. And this is really a good term used in the development processes in technical terms, but separation of concerns really plays well here. The source of truth and separation of concerns is two concepts that you should always be keeping in mind. A creative person should not need to know how that piece of content will be delivered and in what formats to different syndication channels. And the product person should not even be worried about how that content gets created. So that's when you separate the concerns of these people from different parts of the supply chain. So when you are in the DAM, the source of truth for any digital content should be the DAM. When you are looking at your product information management system, all marketing-based content for your products should be based out of that. But digital assets should still be coming from the DAM. So when you keep these two sources of truth and separate the concern of these different people with different roles, then you have to make these systems to talk to each other and synchronize the content. A good example is integrating DAM and PIM systems, where DAM system provides all the product images and product media out to PIM system, and product information management systems provide detailed product data to the DAM systems. And the dam systems will be able to leverage the product data to enhance searching, filtering within the dam system to minimize the mistakes people do when they are typing product data. So a creative person's concern should be to create the best image for your product, but not to type the product information correctly into the dam system when they're uploading. So now you can see the pattern that we are putting too much effort onto our creative team to add metadata into these product images, whereas it could all be done by simple synchronization of these two systems. So these are some of the examples. There is one more example which is very typical in our campaign execution process, which is working with project management solutions like there are Asana, Workfront, ClickUp, those type of systems out there. And those systems are used to improve your processes and streamline them so you can get your campaigns out the door better, create your content faster. And all of that data that you type in for your projects within those systems that include the campaigns can be very helpful to be associated to the output of those campaigns, and those assets end up being in the dam. And you don't need to retype all that information. So that's another use case where integrating the workflow systems with the dam systems can provide efficiencies within your workflows and provide automation for your teams. So these are all different examples, and some of them are used heavily depending on the type of the company. But let's hear from Kim from Kohler, how they automate these type of processes in real life. For a company at the global level as Kohler is, there are lots of automations in place, and Kim will talk about some of these, and she can give us some of the examples.
Thank you, Boulant, and thanks to Henry Stewart and CyanGate for having me as well. I'm glad to be here. Before I dive into discussing how we employ automation, I want to just discuss a little bit about the technology stack. In a perfect world, some of us might wish that every system was owned and managed by one team. At some companies, this may be the case. It's not at Kohler right now. We might also dream about systems growing at the same rate with budgets for upgrades and improvements coming in synchronicity, but the reality is this doesn't happen for the majority of companies, big or small. It's so important to collaborate with the teams that own the systems that connect to ours if we hope to leverage the capabilities for automation that are available for either or both together. DAM does not reside in a vacuum. It certainly can't when we start talking about automation workflows outside of basic import and metadata application. I won't get into specifics on what Kohler is doing with our technology, but I can go through how we balance manual workflows with automation. So let's dive into import. Go to the next slide. So we have multiple ways of ingesting assets into the system. We know we have our upload through the UI, right? That's our basic human interaction with the tool. That capability will be here. It may go away at some point, but there's nothing like just clicking that upload and getting that asset in quickly. We all have done that, and if you work in DAM, and it's something that I still enjoy doing. We can also do it through bulk asset upload when we want to. But we have some automation at Kohler that we utilize. Some of that's built into the DAM, and some of that is with other tools and with some integrations. So our first option there is we have an asset import tool that's built into our DAM, created for us by one of our partners. That upload tool allows us to stage the assets and then pull them into the DAM in one fell swoop using metadata through spreadsheets. So it's still a little bit of that manual work, but there is that what I call junior automation happening there. We also can do single asset or bulk asset upload through tool synchronization. So we do have an arm of our DAM that is sort of an file sharing tool that allows us to share assets out to an audience that doesn't have access to our DAM. And that tool also allows us to synchronize and pull assets in. So we might have a photographer that's out on site and doing a shoot, and they need to get those assets into the dam easily. They can push them through that tool, and we can synchronize to the dam. So we have some automation there. And then we also utilize S3 buckets and FTP to ingest single asset or bulk assets into the dam. That we also have an automation where everything happens from that S3 bucket, including the metadata based on file naming conventions, which I'll get a little bit into when we talk about metadata. And then what is our future? Are we fully hands-off? As somebody who's passionate about DAM, I never want to be fully hands-off. I like being in there and updating metadata and doing uploads. But the more content we get, the more we need to have some hands-off capabilities. So for Kohler, we have a ticket tool that our customers can submit requests to get assets into the dam or out of the dam or whatever needs to happen. Is there some automation there that we can think about for future state where a ticket can be created, assets can be ingested in, metadata can be applied, and it becomes a process for the dam team to be the approvers rather than the uploaders and the taggers? And as the approvers, it frees us up to really understand our collection and become curators of this dam and spend less time doing that day-to-day task and more time really curating the best assets for the downstream tools, for publication, and for these creative teams as well. So the next slide, we'll talk about metadata. So we have some manual processes and some automation there as well. Of course, during your upload, you can apply your metadata in the UI. You can also do that via editing assets that are already in the dam as well. Junior, you guys all know this. We also have built into our dam that CyanGate helped us with a spreadsheet ingestion of metadata. So if I have a couple hundred assets that are already in the dam, but I need to make some changes to the data, I can just do that through a spreadsheet. So I'm not touching every single asset. I'm not even doing a bulk upload of a few assets that have metadata in common, but I'm allowing that spreadsheet process to apply that metadata across through some minor or junior automation. We can also do some automation through the S3 buckets and FTP with metadata, as I mentioned, by having specific file names on those original assets that are coming in through that automation. The DAM and the PIM work together and allow us to pick that metadata out from that file name and apply it to the asset as metadata as it comes in. So there's no human interaction there with that asset once we've dropped it through that S3 bucket or FTP process. So there's that's less than junior, it's a little more advanced automation. And then of course our PIM integration via API. PIM integration is really important, as Boulant was discussing. It really allows you to free up the different experts that are in each side of that tool to not have to do all of that manual work. We can ingest assets into the dam, we can apply SKU, for instance, and then the dam can reach to PIM and say, here's an asset that belongs to this SKU. PIM says, thanks, here's some information about that asset, and that comes back into the dam as metadata. So that's a pretty simple integration that we can do between dam and PIM. It can get more complex as we go and when we talk about syndication, but for metadata, that integration can be pretty simple, and you can pull that data back from your PIM into your dam. And then the future is AI, right? How are we going to utilize AI to apply metadata to assets? Are we utilizing an AI that's built into our dam, or are we going to go out to a third party and look for some more advanced software that might be a little bit more tested than our dam AI? AI has been around for a long time. It's been in machine learning as well, has been in place for several years, but really this past year, 2 years, it's just become a hot topic. ChatGPT really contributed to that. But when we talk about AI, when it comes to streamlining our work and creating more automation, there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's challenges as well. I'm sure we'll get into those challenges when we get into the Q&A section of this conversation, but AI is something that we are going to look at tapping into. All companies, I think, are interested, but it's there for us. We just got to figure out how to best use it. So then when we go to the next slide and we talk about syndication, we're talking about getting those assets out of the dam where they need to go. There are ways to do that. Some of them are very like manual and pedestrian, right? Direct upload to CMS. You don't really want to do that unless that's your current process. If you have automation in place, you want to avoid that. But there are times when it has to happen. If you're going through an upgrade, for instance, and your dam is in a freeze, but you're still syndicating, you're still sending assets out, you still have a website to keep updated. You might have to do some direct uploads to CMS. There's also the opportunity to upload via FTP to your CMS. So you might be doing that. If you have multiple CMSs globally, there are some smaller teams that might not quite utilize your dam yet, and so they're doing some uploads directly to the CMS through an FTP. Those are some possible manual processes that are happening. You can also share to your CMS via API. So within our dam, we have the ability to send assets through so that they can go through just with a click of a share button from the dam. So you're shopping and curating assets and you're just making those clicks. So a little bit manual and a little bit of automation there. And then scheduling delivery, right? So we have some capabilities that have been built for us that allow us to share assets through scheduled deliveries. That means that as I drop assets into a specific location in the dam on a schedule, those assets then are pushed through the downstream systems, utilizing the information that's in PIM, as we've talked about, and sending those assets through to go to the CMS for publication. And then metadata driven deliveries, right? So that's really utilizing the PIM. The assets are in the dam, the data's in the PIM. We have some ability to drive assets through with no human touch. The only human touch is dropping the assets in the folder. As long as the metadata is on the asset, PIM is going to see that, it's going to pick that up, it's going to know that that asset belongs to that product, and it's going to pass that asset down through that delivery. And it's also going to tell the downstream systems where that asset should publish. So on the other side, on that CMS side, you're also allowing some automation to happen, and you don't have to have that human that's placing simple assets. You've got your humans working on the more complex content, the copy and placing SEO and placing assets for authoring. And then, what does the future hold for syndication? This is a question mark because we don't know. We're always looking to the future, always trying to see what we might be able to do with automation and utilizing tools that help us to bring all of our content together, all of our systems together is one way of making that happen. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to David Sultan. He's going to talk to us about CyanGate has been using a new approach to integration to accomplish those automation goals.
Great, thank you so much, Kim, and very wonderful insight. So how do you optimize your customer touch point, like product detail page, or some refer to as a PDP? How do you make that engaging? What's needed? So let's talk a little bit about the ecosystem that involves. Obviously, both Kim and Bülent mentioned them. So your DAM holds your assets, your PIM holds your product data, like your SKU, your description, your category, or the channel-specific data. And the syndications are really the endpoint, the customer touch point, whether it's a marketplace like Home Depot, Amazon, maybe it's your website, maybe it's your CMS, maybe it's your e-commerce site, and also could be your print. So the goal is really to try to have all of your customer touch point, like the product detail page, to be accurate, to be relevant, but also be engaging, which is really where the DAM sort of comes in. Now, what this really requires is a lot of your DAM and PIM systems and e-commerce system to be tightly connected. And there are different ways of doing that. So why don't we start looking into how information is flowing between those two systems. So a typical flow can go in obviously in many directions, but a typical flow of your content and product information between DAM and PIM will start either by images are typically will be pushed to a syndication directly without going through a PIM. An example could be you just want to get your images on your website. You may need just a product information on your e-commerce platform. But the reality is that a lot of the time you want something to synchronize them before they go, especially if you want to be able to have an easy way to integrate or automate that flow of information so that all of your product data and images sort of get married together prior to syndication. That's kind of more of an advanced use case. But you, as I mentioned, you could have a direct asset just getting in directly to your e-com or to your CMS and your PIM. So the information may flow in all sorts of direction, but at the end of the day, you really want to make sure that none of this is done manually. So let's start to look at the actual users and the ecosystem. If you can jump to the next slide. So if you kind of look at the very, very high level, on the DAM side, many of the users will be independent. So everybody has their own job function, whether it's a DAM user, a PIM user, an e-commerce manager. We'll start at the DAM world, and there you'll have, for example, photographer. They take pictures, they do photo shoot, they drop assets in some kind of a hot folder. You may have an agency that manages this. This can be an internal or an external agency. You may have a full creative team who are building, your banners and everything else. You have folks who are, whether responsible for your brand. Things may be stored locally. At the end of the day, at the DAM side, you're creating media, you're enriching the metadata, as Bill mentioned earlier, for easier searching. You classify. There may be some kind of a transformation happening. You build your guidelines for using the brands. So all of those activities are really happening behind the scene by a very dedicated and smart team. On the PIM side, if you look at the bottom, at the PIM side, you have a lot of information that may be coming from data pools. You may have product manager updating all your product information. You may have your e-commerce team kind of working on your website. Suppliers may be providing you specific pricing or specific SKU information. Maybe engineering, you may have some PDF or things that are about drawing about that particular product. You may have a very channel specific information. So information that sits in your Amazon channel may look different than what it looks like on your commerce channel. So, and things may be sitting also in your ERP and PLM system. So all this data typically automatically will move into the PIM, where your product manager or whoever is responsible for your PIM system will work through data validation, maybe some cleansing of the data, product creation, and a lot of data enrichment and categorization. While all of those things are happening between the DAM and the PIM, as my earlier slide suggested, you want that information to properly flow between them in a very easy way, so that when you're ready for syndication, and when you're ready to send your stuff to the web, to your commerce, to your print, or maybe to your Amazon channel, all that information has to properly be married, consolidated, and syndicated. So that's really the approach around automation. So if you can jump to the next slide. Then if you look at this complex ecosystem, what we've done, we've built a system. We've been doing this for many, many years. And as CyanGate, as a company, we decided to build a way to integrate them a little bit easier. So what it means is that all of those activities, whether they happen in a silo or there's kind of collaboration between the teams, your systems are still independent. Every PIM vendor is trying to include some DAM functionality, and every DAM functionality is trying to include PIM functionality. But today it's pretty much kind of like all over the place. So we've built one tag, which is kind of, think of it as a integration platform as a service, or think of it as an automated solution where we can very easily connect and move data and content without really writing a single line of code. There are some cases where you do need, if there's transformation and data mapping, we can definitely do that. But what we really are trying to do is avoid complex projects. So the way we approach it is we built what we call pre-built templates. I like to call them recipes, but a pre-built template can be something as simple as a template for connecting your DAM and your PIM. If you have Salsify as an example as your PIM or syndication engine, and maybe you have InRiver, or you may have Media Valet as your DAM, then this is an example of a pre-built template. When you deploy the template, then you can customize it. It's much easier way to go to market with it. It makes things a lot easier. You have a central way to integrate all of your automation. It's a lot more flexible when you don't have to have a very major project every time you want to make a change. And also, if you want to be able to decide, hey, how long would it take me to integrate this and the other? Typically, a project may be months and months. Whereas when you take an approach of like OneTag or other iPaaS solutions out there, you can actually cut down your development time like literally by 70%. You still have to do an analysis, you still have to do a lot of design, but the actual coding or handshaking between those systems significantly get reduced. So let's take a look a little bit about how our platform actually works. So we've actually have 4 what we call core pillars to OneTag. The first one is what we refer to as our core connectors. And the core connectors, think of them as any kind of a storage solution, maybe an FTP, Google Sheets, like Excel spreadsheet, anything that it's really productivity driven. In many cases, I would say most corporations have them in the back of the mind in any kind of systems. But the prime connectors is what are in this ecosystem. So think of the DAM, the PIM, the CMS, even a workflow automation like Workfront from Adobe. So core connectors and prime connectors are sort of how we build our system on. But the way we connect them is through 2 main concepts. One of them is called a connection and one of them is called a flow. So think of a connections as a way to handshake between those systems. So you build a connection between, say, a DAM and a PIM, and you may do this in a development environment. So it's one connection. You may do the same thing in a production environment. So there'll be a second connection. Or you may have a connection in your, for your one user group that works in marketing or one in sales. And the way we do it is by building those flows. So the connection just established a handshake that you can log into those systems and have access to all the API. But then when you build the flow, you now start to drag and drop the different system you want to connect. And then you apply your business rules through a very simple user interface. And I would say in a majority of the time, we don't really have to write any code unless there is a lot of transformation of data. And then we do allow some low code functionality. And then finally, we also offer what we call transformation. So in many cases, if you have either data that needs to be transformed before it goes out or an image that needs to be transformed, we do have some tools and utilities to make that process a lot easier. If you could jump to the next slide. So how do we actually put this all together? So think about this as when we first sort of came out to the market with OneTag, we sort of came in more of a generic, okay, we can connect anything to anything. It grates and it helps, but in many cases, you talk to the end user and they have a very specific problem, very specific use case they need to address. So we start building those templates to make it easier. So the first one is our DAM and PIM syndication. I've spent about 10 years in the DAM world, probably more, and I spent about 6 to 8 years in the PIM world. And at the end of the day, we sort of kind of do the same thing in 2 systems, and there's always complex projects that you have to write. So in this case, you look at the top one, for example, we build a synchronization of your assets and your product data between them. So in the first example, if you take, for example, Media Valet, which is a DAM, InRiver, which is a PIM, what we've done is we set up a webhook that sits in the and listens to any activities that are changing within the DAM. So any changes to an asset will automatically be triggered and be moved right into InRiver, into the media tab. So when you go in there, your media, all your media assets will be up to date based on all the changes that are happening in your DAM. And we can do exactly the same thing with a Primo, Binder, Scaleflex, or any other major DAM vendors out there. So that's kind of like the main example of a flow. If you jump to the next slide, there are other use cases, and I believe Bülent also mentioned it early on. You have all of your project management tool. You may use Airtable, Slack, ClickUp, Workfront, and sometime maybe Zendesk. Maybe somebody opens up a ticket the way Kim described earlier. And you may just want to move assets from your ticketing system or your project management system if you're working on campaign, and you want all of those to automatically be created and managed in your DAM. So we also build a flow templates or recipe to handle that use case. And one of our, probably the biggest project we had so far is really the ability to take all your digital assets and your product information, synchronize them, and then syndicate them all to one marketplace. And in this case, we're using Syndigo as the final repository. And that means that all of the assets and product data are synchronized based on a unique G10. and they end up going right into your marketplaces, Amazon or Kroger, wherever it needs to go. And that use case is fairly complex with a lot of metadata and data moving across. Now, it doesn't have to be Syndigo. You may be sending it to Salesforce. You may be using WordPress. You may have a Shopify environment. You may have an Adobe Clouds or whatever that may be. So our approach to solving it is less about custom development and more about templates and recipes to make things a lot faster, time to market for you as a customer. And that's pretty much kind of what I had to kind of how to put it all together. We're going to jump right into a Q&A. We're all going to jump back into the screen. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for those insights, everyone, between Bülent, Kim, and David. I think the collective brain power here and the experience in PIM and DAM and this whole industry is just immense. So please make sure you submit your questions via the chat, and we can get to those. I do have one that came in already, and I think this one's specifically for Kim. So how has the increase in digital assets impacted businesses like yours? What's different in the last couple of years?
Yeah, the increase has had a great impact, obviously, on all of us. For us specifically, it's keeping, that churn, right? Keeping those new assets rising to the top, but making sure that those valuable assets that are there are not sinking to the bottom. Keeping our DAM fresh is really important. We have global teams as well that we're starting to roll in. So the past few years of getting those global teams and their libraries in has been really an important step for us. We can talk about, some smaller teams that are, peppered throughout the enterprise, and you might see them having their own little siloed library. And so we want the DAM to be the single source of truth. And so it becomes challenging when you have global teams creating their own content. So really pulling those teams in, making sure that they understand DAM, making sure that they have access and that you're performing those migrations as well. So for us, the challenge is a little bit of, keeping the content fresh and brought to the top, and then keeping those teams brought in as well.
Great answer. Thank you for that, and great question. There's another question that I think is interesting. So where should a creative or marketing ops team focus to optimize productivity? That's kind of for all three of you, I think, because you each see things in a unique way. So why don't we start with Bülent? What would you say, where should creative teams focus?
I think the main focus areas is where there are other upstream processes that have captured metadata, that have created that metadata early on, and you can avoid retyping or re-inputting that metadata when it comes back into your DAM system, so that you leverage what was already done by integrating those other systems into the DAM. For example, the Workfront or any workflow system. If you have campaign information already in the Workfront system, for example, or Asana, whatever system you may want to use, then you can use that as assets are created for the campaign. You can push those assets into the DAM and leverage that metadata. So look at those type of opportunities where you can repurpose existing metadata, such as the product information or rights information in a contract lifecycle management system. All of those are opportunities for you to grab those early entered metadata that other experts have created and repurpose them within your DAM to fully qualify your assets.
I can add to that a little bit, Eric. I think that the other thing that if you're finding yourself, regardless if you're creative or not, but specifically for creative, if you're finding yourself doing the same thing over and over and over, there's a solution out there. You Google it, you ask ChatGPT, I bet you'll find an answer. So if you're finding yourself doing a lot of things repetitively, go find a solution. There's something out there to make it a little easier for you. So you can focus on your on the core issue that you're trying to do. So that's just another example.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And then this one I think is for Kim. It came in. Can we hear more about how asset ingestion tools were created? And did you partner with your DAM provider, a third party? And lastly, the same question is, how do other organizations engage to get similar capabilities? So any or all of those, Kim?
Yeah, so the asset ingestion tools, as Boulant and David both have mentioned, that opportunity to ingest from a ticketing system like Workfront, we're not there yet. That's something that we want to work on, right? So we have to engage with the owner of that tool, as well as the partners that we work with that help us with our DAM growth, with any implementations, any upgrades that we want to do. With the current tools that we have, full disclosure, those were created for us by CyanGate. We've worked closely with CyanGate for a long time to help us to create those tools. So it's really having a partner that can help you work on your DAM. And that's typically not your vendor. It might be, your vendor does have some capabilities and some tools, and they're gonna help you grow those tools as well. If you come to your vendor and you tell them, we want to be able to do this. They have other customers that have definitely given them that feedback. And joining a team of customers for a specific vendor so that you can monthly give them feedback on the tool is going to help to develop some of those processes. So we have some that are internal to the tool. The ones that we have that are external to the tool, we just had to engage with an implementation partner, with somebody that we have regular cadence with and that we have an agreement with, that they'll work on things for us. And then, of course, after that, it's just getting that budget approved, which we all know is the hardest part.
Great, good answers. I hope that answers your question, Ashley. And then there was another one for Kim. For Kim, how do you leverage your team to take care of all these parts? Sort of, do you have a robust team, a small team? How do you deal when they're pulled in all different directions?
Yeah, so we actually have a really small team. Our DAM team is 6 people. We have 4 people that sit in Wisconsin. I'm in Texas, and then we have another team member who's in Georgia. And we have collections. So you may not know as much about Kohler as you think you know. Kohler has a lot of businesses. We have hospitality. We have resorts that are in Wisconsin and Scotland. We have golf courses. We have chocolate. We make chocolates. Recently, Kohler has been in the energy business. There's some changes happening there. And then, of course, I manage the luxury businesses. So we have a Ansax Tile as well. So each of our team members sort of is a collection specialist managing a different collection. So if you have a small team, it might benefit you to look at it that way, to say, do we have different collections, or are we a single business? A lot of businesses have a bunch of different brands that they have to manage. And so when you have a small team, you need to specialize in those collections. And that's how we sort of keep things in check. So not everybody's working on the Ansax Tile, it's only me, and I can really focus on that. But we do have a massive global team of users, but they're also content creators. So there's a lot of challenge there to make sure that all of our content creators that are utilizing our DAM, and should be, because we want the DAM across the globe to be the single source of truth for all digital assets. We need to keep them up to date. We need to make sure that we have communication open always about changes that we're making, needs that they have, because as a small team, it can get out of hand really fast. So we have to keep things really high and tight.
Wow, 6 people on the team, amazing for such a huge B2B company that has so many different arms. That's great. Thanks for that question, Christina. And then one last question. I think we have time for a question that will apply to all 3 of you. And this is mine, okay? But what lessons have you learned along the way that you could share? What's something that you feel like people need to know this about what you're doing these days and with the evolving changes in the industry? So let's start with David.
Oh my God, I wasn't expecting that.
Ready.
I think it's actually related to the other question about there's always a solution for something out there. So if you've been doing the same thing, and like at least for me, I worked in the DAM space for a very long time, and then in the PIM space. At the end of the day, we all have very similar challenges. So you may be working in kind of like in a silo because you're dealing with the assets, but somebody at the other end needs the information. If you're working with PIM and you're enriching your data, well, somebody at the other end may need it for something else. So having that information, think kind of beyond what you do and how does it impact somebody else in another organization. I think that will make a big difference. I'm sure, Kim, you can probably agree with that with your team. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's go to you, Kim. And what would you say? What's one lesson that you've learned that you would want to share with this audience?
I think it's really, there's so many. I'll try to think of one. Really keeping your content fresh. It is easy to let your dam become a dusty library where 80% of your assets are never utilized, and you have this 20% that always rise to the top. And trying to keep that fresh, we're ingesting hundreds of assets a day. And as those new assets come in, and that's where everybody's focus and excitement is about, are those old assets sort of kind of falling off in the distance? And are you forgetting about the rights management that's associated with those assets? So for me, rights management is something that I am super keen on, especially when it comes to AI. And so just learning, using the tools available to you, using that PIM data to really understand what you have in your dam, and keeping that content fresh, and making sure that if you're utilizing an asset in one region, but it has value in another, that other region understands what's available to them as well.
Great. Okay, and Boulant, we'll close with you. What's your lesson learned that you want to share with this group?
We start with many dam implementations that we do ourselves, and then we do also enhancements to existing systems. And what we see initially is that the data cleansing part is the biggest challenge. Usually you get in there, everybody is super excited about putting in a dam system or integrating them with their ERP systems, CMS systems, but there is no common language. There is no common taxonomy built to support that integration and to talk in the same language between these systems. When you try to put the data in, the data is completely missing or completely wrong, or it can be old data that time has passed, brands have updated. There are so many ways to call your even flagship product in a company. I've seen that happen. One person can call it in a old name that got stuck with them, and branding happened and they changed the name. So all those things in different systems cause the biggest headache. And that's really the first thing you should think about, building governance model around your taxonomy, and the metadata governance is really important. So those type of things, that house cleaning is really important before taking on a very large project. But it's not that you can fix things immediately. Fix where you can, I would say that, because I've also seen people get into that deep dive into trying to fix things, and it's doesn't happen overnight. It takes forever to get everybody to agree on the common language. It's pretty hard to get those groups to talk to each other and to agree on that same concept, same language to use across all these different systems. That's
great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's great advice. Big insights from this team. So communications, there might be a tool for you, look for it. Consistency, and then again, back to the understanding of data cleansing and a common taxonomy. So I think that's all the time we have today. If there were other questions that came through that we didn't get an opportunity to answer, we will certainly answer those and send them in our follow-up. Thank you so much to our panelists, especially Kim Johnson from Kohler, David Sultan from OneTag, and Boulant from CyanGate, and to Henry Stewart for hosting this webinar for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.